Thank you all for joining us, and in the interest of time, I will run very quickly through the bios of our next panelists. You will recognize Scott Woodard from the previous panel. Thanks, Scott, for doing this twice. The other two participants, Flavia Tshibangu is a senior advisor to President Tshisekedi and the Prime Minister, and one of the authors of a U.S. DRC Rwandan peace plan that is currently being advanced. You may have read about it in the news. Flavia, you will also recognize from one of the photos that Kurt shared a few minutes ago. And finally, last but not least, our newest Director General of KoBold Metals DRC, Benjamin Katabuka. He comes to us from Steinweg, which is a major international logistics company, and prior to that, he was with Freeport McMoran, one of the senior executives running Tenke Fungurume and Kisanfu. These are two of the mines that were sold by the Americans, an American company, to the Chinese, and we're happy that he is ushering an American company back into the DRC. So please welcome our panelists, and we'll get started. Thank you.
If you have questions, please use the Slido so we can give those to Jennifer.
Oh, it's on? Okay, all right. So panelists, I have, as you know, I have 3 questions that I will pose to each of you. The first question is for Flavia on the DRC U.S. Rwandan peace accord that is currently being advanced in Washington. Would love to hear from the DRC government's perspective how how particularly critical mineral investment in your country is going to play a role in advancing peace and prosperity and development in your country.
Thank you so much, Jen, and a big thank you to KoBold, a big thank you to Kurt. It was a pleasure receiving the team anytime KoBold comes to the DRC. I think we have a great time working. So on behalf of the Congolese government, I want to thank everyone here at Mineral X. We know that right now, if there's people that did not know where the DRC are, I think because of this DRC-US mineral deal, I think some people know at least it's in Central Africa, at least. And there are 2 Congos, and right now we're talking about the big one. And so just to kind of give a little bit of background, there's been a 30-year war that has been going on, and the war has been about nothing but minerals. It's not an ethnic war, it's not a tribal war, it's an economic war. And it's been backed by, unfortunately, our neighbors, Rwanda, and different heads of states have tried to chime in and help put an end to it, and there just seems to be a never-ending process. And so what has happened is a group of people, including myself, sat down for the past 2.5 years and came up with an economic solution to an economic problem. It's an economic war. And so the DRC in the eastern region loses about $10 billion a year in revenue because of all of the minerals that leave that area, go past Rwanda, up to another country, sometimes European countries, and then winds up in China and winds up in your favorite electronic device. And so the DRC people do not get even a dime of it. And so the Amani Prosperity Plan, which is the real name of the US DRC minerals deal, Amani means peace in Swahili, which is the main language spoken in that deal. It's basically to pacify the East using economic development. So the idea is to politely ask the Rwandan troops and M23 troops to leave the area, and we replaced that area with economic drivers, the private sector, the defense sector, and of course, social development, because we cannot leave that area like that. We're talking about a group of 25 to 30-year-old kids that this is all they've known for the past 30 years. So if we leave them with nothing to do, they're going to be the next rebels in the years to come. And so in that area, should peace come in that area, and as well as the rest of the DRC, we're looking at about 100 billion to 250 billion in revenue per year for all companies involved. the beauty about the DRC, I think Graceland mentioned that Ukraine or Australia was the periodic table on fire. I think that the DRC would raise Australia in that a geologist told me that the periodic table, the DRC has every element on the periodic table except for 2. And so we have about $34 trillion in reserves under our soil that is not just in the East, it's all over. And this deal doesn't just represent minerals, it also represents tourism, arable land. The DRC can feed 1.2 billion people. So that's the basis of what the minerals deal is about.
Thank you, Flavia. And Deputy Assistant Secretary Woodard, same question for you. I know you spoke to this a little bit on your previous panel, but within the DRC context, what is the role of the U.S. private sector and critical minerals in advancing this peace and prosperity deal in Central Africa?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing that this administration sort of has recognized is the importance of Africa for the future of the world, really. You know, if under current demographic trends by 2050, 1 out of 4 people on the face of the earth is going to be African. Now, they're not all going to be Congolese, but a good chunk of them. It's a big country. And so this administration has taken a different look at how it wants to interact with the African continent, and really we're starting with the DRC as a country where the mineral wealth is unquestioned, and so this administration wants to take a very good look at how it can promote that different kind of relationship, a trade-driven relationship instead of an aid-driven relationship. And so we've engaged very closely with key governments in the region, in this case most particularly the DRC as well as Rwanda. And we've been working very, very hard to try to get these 2 countries to reach an agreement that can allow the circumstances that can promote investment. And so we are hard at work, even this very week, trying to make that happen. By working closely with a number of private companies, we're also trying to encourage a different kind of start, to give the DRC a different choice. One thing that I heard when I was at the mining indaba in South Africa in February from a lot of African countries was they would like a better choice. China does not offer, or for a long time has offered the only option. That was the only country, Chinese companies were the only companies willing to make investments in many places in Africa. And the leadership of many African countries would like to see something else. And so we think there's a theory of the case where American and Western companies can make investments in places like the DRC and succeed. And so we think by getting a successful example or 2, that will then build on itself, and then that will prove that it can be done. Because for a while, people in the sector, they all look kind of longingly at the DRC, like, oh, man, I would just love to get in there. I know they've got fantastic geology, but it's just too risky. And so if we can help reduce some of that risk, then the case for investment, I think, will start to speak for itself. And so that's the theory, and we're going to give it a real shot here. So.
Thanks, Scott. And Benjamin, as the senior representative for one of the companies that has been looking longingly at the DRC for quite a few years and is now in the process of entering that country, what's the role of the private sector in advancing peace and prosperity in the Congo?
Thank you, Jen. First of all, I think I should say that it's about 2 weeks that I've joined KoBold officially. So I'm pretty new, actually, as an employee of KoBold in the DRC. But this clearly, I think, an engagement, a commitment from KoBold to do business in the DRC. I'm a DRC citizen myself, and I've been actually in the mining sector in the DRC for a while. as a private sector and KoBold, and I'd say a US company, what KoBold actually has committed and is planning to do in the DRC around 3 pillars. And I think one of the pillars is the, Kurt has talked about that extensively, is the digitization of the archives in the DRC. And we hope that this will clearly open up more investment in the DRC if those the data are made public. That investment definitely will bring more companies in the DRC. I would say more responsible investment in the country. And the second pillar is the exploration, which KoBold is planning to stake in the DRC, greenfield, and start exploration work in the DRC. And the third one is developing, getting to the development of the project when we fund discoveries. And we're also working, and I think you've seen that in the media, on acquiring the Manono project, the Manono deposit, in developing that deposit in a responsible way. So that investment will create jobs. Of course, I'm the first employee in the DRC. We're planning to start hiring more employees for activities in the DRC. And using, of course, local suppliers and investing a little bit more in upgrading the infrastructures, and talking about roads, energy, and so on. And we think that all those will definitely contribute to prosperity and the development of the country.
Thanks, Benjamin. So we've talked a little bit about what it is that we are all working together to achieve. Flavia, if you could speak briefly to how, and particularly how we are going to sort of achieve escape velocity. How are we going to do this quickly?
Okay. First of all, I want to say that digitalizing the survey is probably going to help multiple companies come in a lot quicker, because the idea, yes, because the idea behind the Amani Prosperity Plan in the execution is creating a menu. Because a lot of companies, they don't know what they want. They don't know what to go after. They'll say, I want lithium, and they don't know exactly. If you don't know where the DRC is, you're not going to know where the lithium in the DRC is, you know? And so the idea is to create a menu and help companies come in through a task force that would be formulated by both governments. And the task force will not be packed with politicians, because when you put politicians and stuff, that's when it gets tricky. But it will be industry experts, academic experts, geologists, and it will be kind of a conglomerate of both DRC specialists and the US specialists. Scott, correct me if I am wrong. And so what's going to happen is that we're going to create kind of like a streamline by which companies will go through. And one of the reasons why the DRC government chose to work with KoBold as a pilot project is because KoBold's due diligence process will drive you to drink. There's no way to like, I've been ready to pull my hair out. However, in the process, you've learned to respect the fact that it minimizes the risks, and it helps to create a system by which other companies that come into the DRC can follow. And by following that system, I think that we can get to a point where economic development happens very quickly. The companies get what they want, which is high ROI, and the DRC government gets what they want, which is development for the people. So it's going to be a joint effort between the US government and the DRC government in order to ensure that partners that come in don't fall into some I want to say some traps that others have fallen into in the past.
Thanks, Flavia. Deputy Assistant Secretary Woodard, same question for you from the perspective of the U.S. government.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say, for example, I really like seeing the pictures of Tiburon up there because, that it seems like such a simple thing, and yet we've already spent a lot of time and effort just trying to make that initial kind of get-together there in Brussels kind of happen. So we're engaged with our embassy there in Kinshasa and with KoBold to try to put something together on this that just makes sense and can actually move forward and create something, very real. Because I think for all the reasons that, Kurt explained in his talk, having the data out there and available will help not just a particular project, but will help, all of the DRC, and it will help all of the companies that hopefully in the future will be working in the DRC and a lot of other economies around the world who can also help benefit along with the DRC from the natural geologic endowment that the country already has. So I think it's only by working closely and continue to encourage all of the actors to kind of behave in the right way is what's going to allow this kind of to move forward. And it often feels like it's a lot more difficult than it should be because I think a lot of us here in this room can kind of see the target and can see what should happen. But all those interim steps along the way are tough, and that's why you need the engagement of so many actors to kind of make it happen, because it's not easy. If it were easy, it would already be done, right? So got to kind of stick at it.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And same question for you, Benjamin. How do we do this fast?
Sorry?
How do we do this? How does KoBold?
Yeah, I think what what is important for KoBold is that when we entering the DRC, and we know that it's not a country where the business climate is easy, but we've set up actually our standards quite high in terms of anti-corruptions. Those are the things that we actually are very strict, and we have already at the beginning we've set the tone and with the government officials that we uphold the very high standards in terms of corruptions, anti-corruptions, and this is our dealing with the government. And we think that by doing that, we're showing an example clearly that in order to do actually have a responsible investment in the country, this is something important. And we hope that this can attract, by being in the DRC in the country, we can attract more investment coming from the US and Western countries.
Yeah, thanks. And some of you have touched on this already, but we heard Minister Kubrikov and Daniel Rundy discussing some of the corruption risks this morning in Ukraine. I looked it up on Corruption Perceptions Index. It's somewhere between 103 and 108 in the last couple of years. The DRC, out of 180 countries, I think last year was 166. It's ranked quite low on this index. Flavia, how specifically is the DRC government going to work to improve the investment climate, particularly by addressing this perception and perhaps reality of corruption?
Okay, that's a great question. President Tshisekedi already has some institutions in place. There is Le Bureau des Climats des Affaires, which is the Business Climate Bureau that is attached directly to his office. There's also the Inspector General of Finance, whose job is to kind of look at how investments happen and look at the financials and to try to determine where corruption does happen. And the Bureau of Business Climate actually publishes annually profits and losses associated with corruption every single year. And that permits the Prime Minister and other institutions to basically figure out where there's hole and kind of plug up those holes. So when it comes to this DRC US deal, one of the biggest things that we are focused on is following the KoBold model and following the way KoBold has done their due diligence. That's why I think I mentioned that in my previous answer, because it has set a tone for a more rigorous, a more meticulous way of doing business. Now, Congo has been like this for almost 60 years. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not going to change overnight because it is a mindset thing. Unfortunately, our Chinese partners don't help because they come in with bags on the table for assets that they want. But now, because we are shifting to a more formalized way of doing things, because a lot of things happen informal, this is why digitalization will be very important, because electronically, you can't really scam as easily as you will on paper. And so this is why during this process, we will have a procedure to help companies, especially, let's say you have a company that wants to come in, they don't know how to register to become a company, they don't know how to sign up for a permit, and somebody will charge you $20K just to help them do that, just to help you do that. And so we want to make sure that no company falls under that everything happens with transparency, and this is what this peace deal will help resolve.
Thank you, Flavia. Yeah, sunshine is the best disinfectant, they say. One of the other benefits, it's not an ancillary benefit of digitizing all of the data in these archives in Tervuren, which I've been to now twice in the last 5 weeks, speaking of being driven to the drink. Scott, over to you. How is the U.S. government gonna support this effort on anti-corruption?
I'd make kind of 2 points, I think, on corruption. One, I think we all have to recognize, corruption exists in many countries, in fact, all countries kind of around the world, right? If you follow the news in the U.S. today, in fact, you might know that a former senator, Bob Menendez, the former chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is due to start an 11-year prison sentence for corruption. So, you got to be careful about your own glass house before you start throwing stones anywhere else. But corruption's real, it has to be dealt with, and I think that's the most important thing, is that governments try to deal with corruption, because it's something that just kind of exists. The other point that I would make is that China has made things a lot worse, I think, as Flavia pointed out. The way Chinese companies have gone about doing business on the African continent has absolutely made the problem of corruption far, far worse. They've encouraged governments and officials to treat resources in a way that do not benefit the local population. And I think our modern Western mining and processing companies, for a variety of reasons, operate differently. And so we will continue to encourage that. And I think that getting more, again, modern Western American and other mining companies involved can only be helpful on this front, and help ensure that the benefits of the geological patrimony that countries in Africa have will finally benefit the local population. And I've met a number of these Western kind of mining companies, and they are dedicated to kind of that in a way that I think the industry hasn't been in decades past. But I think they do recognize that today, if you want to be a modern mining company, you're going to have to figure out how to ensure that the local population gets the benefits of what you're doing, or your project isn't going to work properly.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So we have a number of questions, and I think I'll direct the first to Benjamin, which is, how do companies most efficiently interact with the DRC government to accelerate development in the absence of an existing framework along the lines of what Flavia is currently advancing with the U.S. government and the Rwandan government?
I think there's a framework actually in DRC. What we're trying to do is building a good relationship with the government, and we do have a good relationship with several DRC institutions, including the Ministry of Mines, CAMI. Those are actually the institutions which, the departments which have the authority in the mining sector. And in all what we're doing, of course, I mean, apart from what the DRC government is discussing with the US government, we ourselves have the relationship with the DRC governments on locally, and on the exploration project, on the greenfield, we are already in discussion with the DRC government in order to do whatever is necessary actually to get to the mining licenses for research permits. So I would say the relationship is important. We can have a good relationship with the government without actually getting to corruption with clear guidelines on that one, and that's what we're doing. So we are planning to pursue on that side.
Thank you. And Scott, I'm going to try to combine two of these questions. The first is a softball for you here, which is on FCPA, that is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which enforcement has been suspended in the United States of the FCPA. What are the prospects for the resumption of enforcement on FCPA, and how do you imagine the DRC government will receive that, and do you feel that makes it more difficult for companies like KoBold that drives people to the drink, but for good reason, because we do seek to maintain extremely high standards. How does that, what are the prospects for FCPA resumption? And then on the Chinese use of infrastructure as a carrot for opportunities, how is the U.S. government pursuing kind of similar approaches?
Yeah, so on infrastructure, I'll start with that one first while I think of an answer to the other one. I think one thing to keep in mind is that when you look closely at some of that infrastructure that the Chinese have built, a lot of it is actually of very poor quality and is already kind of crumbling after only a few years. So I think a lot of countries have learned a lesson about what some of that means. We've launched a couple other infrastructure kinds of projects. The Libido corridor is the first one that kind of jumps to mind. This centers around a rail line from the port of Libido in Angola, and kind of stretches into the interior of the continent, depending on how it ends up, possibly into DRC, maybe even Zambia, to connect the copper belt to this port. So that's one way we're doing it. We are using a model where, though, instead of kind of a China's BRI model of kind of dumping a bunch of public money on it, try to crowd in private investment. And that's what we've been pretty successful, I think, so far at getting some of the early pieces of that together. So that is driven by a part of the State Department called the PGI, Partnership for Governance Infrastructure, I think. You get so used to acronyms, you kind of forget what they mean at the end of the day. But PGI has helped driving this infrastructure there and a couple other places as well. Guinea also has a similar kind of rail project that's being encouraged. So there are some efforts, but it's not. We're never going to do, as the U.S. government, that kind of huge outlay on kind of infrastructure that you've seen the BRI do, but rather we can try to coordinate what makes economic sense and try to encourage the private sector to kind of take a bigger chunk and make better quality infrastructure that can actually work for these countries for a longer period of time. On the FCPA, what's interesting is, and I've been trying to find out kind of where the impetus for that kind of came from, and I haven't heard a convincing story yet. What I have heard, though, because I've talked about it with a number of Western mining companies and processors, and all of them like it. Actually, they don't want it to go away because they say that's one of the things that really differentiates how they operate from China and Chinese companies. So I have heard that has something to do with the finance sector, but I'm not entirely sure I've heard a persuasive argument about that. But I think the reality of it is that most of our Western mining companies, they already have those standards kind of already baked into their corporate structure and how they train their people and everything. So I don't foresee that it's gonna, all of our mining companies are suddenly gonna say, do whatever just because the FCPA is prosecutions may be suspended for a while, because I think that's a real differentiator of how our companies operate, and it gives us an advantage actually out in the marketplace. So.
Thank you. Benjamin, there are a number of questions actually for you and Flavia, but I'll give you the first bite here at what are our plans in terms of consulting with the communities, addressing artisanal mining, and developing our human resources locally in the Congo to deliver on our promises?
Yeah. What I'll say, maybe I'll add on what Scott said on the FCPA. I think on that one, it's clear that for KoBold, we continue actually to apply the high standard on anti-corruption. There's no doubt about it. Now, on the developing the consultation with the local communities, I think this comes with the project we'll have in the DRC. Right now, we don't have a project yet, as I said. But when we get to start working on the project, definitely we'll start actually engaging with the local communities. That is important for us, that the local community is engaged. And we have actually clearly a kind of a cahier de charge with the local communities on the project we'll be doing with the local communities. And on developing the local resources or human resources, that's something that KoBold wants to actually have the project in the DRC actually run by local talents. That's important. We've told this to the government, the president, when Kurt was there in April this year. We met with the president, and it was clear that we actually say the clear message that myself as Director General of the KoBold DRC, I'm a Congolese, and we want to build a company around actually the Congolese people, around the Congolese talents. So we'll be working on that. Once we start hiring, we have our operations. We have the plan actually to start training our workforce, transfer the technical know-how and skills, and using less expat if we can. That's really something that we, as a KoBold, we think that's possible, and we're doing that in Zambia. It's a good example. That at Migomba, we have a Zambian teams actually running the operation there. Was there some?
We can give Flavia a chance to answer this question. It's actually directed at her on artisanal and small-scale mining. Does the government currently have a plan to integrate these thousands or tens of thousands of ASM, artisanal and small-scale miners, into the workforce?
Yes, actually, we have several U.S. investors. Again, talking about the framework, the Amani Prosperity Plan, the U.S. DRC deal, is going to be a matchmaking plan. So it's going to be a one-stop shop. So we have U.S. companies or U.S. investors that are planning already on investing in the artisanal mining. And so we have several institutions such as GECAMIN. We have several institutions like ERG that are working together to try to figure out a framework where some of these artisanal miners will go into larger industrial companies. Now, there are others who do not want to. You have to understand that some of these artisanal mines, this is their way of life. And so the DRC government is working to figure out how to shape that and see what that will look like, because it comes with a lot of health hazards, it comes with a lot of environmental hazards as well. But all of that is being worked on into the framework of the DRC-US deal.
Thank you, Flavia. Scott, I apologize. This question, also another softball. We understand that the U.S. will not commit to boots on the ground. what political levers are available to ensure a lasting solution. And this is particularly within the context of the ongoing conflict in eastern Congo, where one of the Congo's neighbors, Rwanda, has occupied several towns in the east.
Well, one is simply the direct engagement is helpful, and that actually has a major impact. You might recall some months ago when M23 was really starting to expand, we actually sanctioned a Rwandan official, and that got a pretty immediate reaction. And some of the M23 forces did kind of pull back. So I think those sorts of things are always on the table. I think you have heard the administration say very clearly that it's not a boots-on-the-ground situation. But again, the part of the theory of the case is that if the U.S. government, in a very clear and unambiguous way, is directly involved, possibly with minority stakes in some of these projects through some of our public finance institutions like DFC, then you have an American presence there. And the theory of the case is that that very concrete American presence on the ground in the DRC in the form of financial investment, in the form of technology investment, that is real. That is no less real than people in green fatigues running around with guns, right? So so again, this may get tested out in the real world, but we haven't really done this to this extent yet in this part of the world. And I think we have some confidence that it can work, and that once you do it, and once it's proven that it can work in one place, then we should see it happen in another place and another place. And we can get this throughout the DRC, because there's lots of places in the DFC that offer some very interesting potential economic returns for American investors. And so that's what we expect to happen, and that's what this administration is definitely going to try to make happen.
Thank you, Scott, Flavia, and Benjamin. To our